Why liver stress often starts silently after 60. You wake up, move through your morning, and nothing feels dramatic enough to call a problem. You still make breakfast, take your pills, and go about the day as usual. But something feels slightly off, even if you cannot explain it right away. Maybe your energy is flatter, your digestion feels slower, or meals sit heavier than before. Most people call that normal aging, but that is often where the real story gets missed. The liver usually does not complain loudly when it is under strain. It tends to fall behind quietly, the way a home filter clogs slowly before water stops flowing well. After 60, the body often becomes less efficient at processing fats, waste, medications, and excess sugar. That does not mean the liver is weak, but it does mean it may have less room for daily overload. And that is why small shifts can show up long before any sharp pain ever does. One of the biggest mistakes people make is waiting for a dramatic warning sign. But liver stress often shows up first as a pattern, not an emergency. It may look like lower stamina, more digestive hesitation, or a body that bounces back more slowly. The signal behind the signal is often this: your system is working harder to do ordinary cleanup. And when that happens, the body usually whispers before it ever says anything clearly. This week, start noticing what happens after meals, in the late afternoon, and the next morning. Pay attention to whether you feel steady, heavy, drained, or unusually slow without a clear reason. A simple step is to keep meals a little lighter for a few days and drink water more consistently. You do not need to panic or overhaul your life overnight to learn something useful here. You only need to observe the pattern with a little more honesty than most people do. That matters more than many older adults realize. The earlier you notice a quiet change, the easier it is to respond with calm and common sense. This is not about fear, and it is not about assuming the worst. It is about reading your body before discomfort becomes disruption. And once you understand that, the next piece becomes much easier to see. Why the liver becomes more sensitive with age. You may notice that foods you handled easily years ago now leave you feeling slower afterward. A heavier lunch lingers longer, a rich dinner feels less forgiving, and recovery takes more time. Sometimes that change is so gradual that you adapt before you fully notice it. You keep functioning, so you assume nothing important is happening inside. But after 60, the body often asks for a little more support and a little less overload. The liver sits at the center of that shift more than most people realize. It helps process nutrients, break down medications, manage stored energy, and filter what the body no longer needs. As we age, metabolism, circulation, digestion, and cellular repair can all become a bit less efficient. Think of it like a dependable engine that still runs well, but no longer likes being pushed the same way. That does not mean failure, but it does mean sensitivity rises when daily habits stay too heavy. This is where people often blame age too quickly and stop looking deeper. Yes, aging changes the body, but biology still follows patterns, and patterns can be understood. A more sensitive liver may show up through slower digestion, flatter energy, or greater reaction to excess sugar or alcohol. The sign behind the sign is not just discomfort, but reduced flexibility in how the body handles stress. And that is often the difference between aging and aging with avoidable strain. Today, notice how your body responds to ordinary choices, not just obviously unhealthy ones. This week, try giving your liver a lighter workload with simpler meals and steadier hydration. A helpful test is to compare how you feel after processed food versus a cleaner, less heavy plate. You do not need a perfect diet to learn from that contrast. You just need enough consistency to let the pattern show itself clearly. In my view, this is one of the most overlooked health shifts after 60. People expect the heart or the joints to demand attention, but the liver often works quietly in the background. And when that quiet support starts getting strained, many other systems feel it too. That is why the next topic matters more than it may seem at first. Because once you see what the liver actually does each day, these warning signs become easier to read. The hidden role your liver plays in energy, digestion, and detox. Most people think about the liver only when blood work comes back abnormal or a doctor mentions it directly. But in daily life, you feel its work in quieter ways long before that point. You feel it when your energy stays steady, when meals digest smoothly, and when your head feels clear. You notice it when you can eat, rest, and move through the day without that dragged down feeling. That is why liver stress can affect ordinary life more than many seniors expect. Your liver helps regulate blood sugar between meals, so energy does not drop too hard or too fast. It also helps process fats, produce bile, and filter out waste the body no longer needs. In simple terms, it works like a steady manager behind the scenes, keeping traffic from piling up. After 60, that backstage work can become more delicate, especially with heavier meals and less recovery room. And when that balance starts slipping, the body often feels less stable before it feels truly sick. This is where the signs can seem unrelated when they are actually connected. Low afternoon energy, bloating after meals, brain fog, and slower recovery may all point to the same burdened system. A common mistake is treating each symptom separately, without noticing the pattern underneath them. The liver is not just a detox organ in the popular sense. It is part of your daily rhythm, and that rhythm matters more than many people realize. A good step today is to watch what happens between breakfast and dinner, not just right after eating. Notice whether your energy crashes, your stomach feels heavy, or your mind gets cloudy by mid-afternoon. This week, try spacing meals more wisely, drinking more water, and reducing one processed food you eat often. Those small changes can reveal more than expensive guesses ever do. And if these calm, practical breakdowns help you connect the dots, staying close to this channel may serve you well. In my view, this is one of the most important body patterns to understand after 60. Because once you see the liver as part of energy, digestion, and cleanup, the next signals stop feeling random. They start looking like clues from the same system, asking for a little less pressure. That shift in understanding gives you more control and less confusion. And the first warning sign often shows up right in the middle of an ordinary day. Warning sign number 1. Unusual afternoon fatigue. You get through the morning reasonably well, and nothing feels especially alarming at first. Then, somewhere after lunch, the day seems to flatten out in a way that feels heavier than it should. You sit down for a moment, and your body seems to ask for more recovery than the day has earned. It is not always sleepiness exactly, and it is not always explained by what you did that morning. Many older adults call that normal aging, but that explanation can sometimes be far too casual. The liver helps manage stored energy, blood sugar balance, and the steady processing of nutrients after meals. When that system is under more strain, energy can become less stable, especially in the afternoon. Think of it like a slow handoff inside the body that no longer feels smooth or well-timed. Instead of giving you a steady supply of usable fuel, the body may start feeling foggy, flat, or sluggish. And after 60, that shift can become more noticeable, because recovery systems are often less flexible. This does not mean every afternoon slump points directly to a liver problem by itself. Poor sleep, dehydration, large meals, medications, and blood sugar swings can also contribute to the same pattern. But when the fatigue feels oddly consistent, especially after heavier meals, it deserves a closer look. The signal behind the signal is often not simple tiredness, but difficulty regulating and clearing the day's metabolic load. That is where the body may be asking for support long before it ever gives a dramatic warning. A useful step today is to compare two kinds of afternoons instead of judging only one. Notice how you feel after a lighter, simpler lunch versus a heavy meal with fried or sugary foods. This week, try adding more water earlier in the day and taking a short walk after lunch if you can. Even 10 minutes of movement may help the body handle the meal with less drag afterward. If fatigue becomes suddenly severe, clearly new, or paired with other concerning symptoms, it is worth discussing with a clinician. In my view, this is one of those signs people dismiss for too long because it feels ordinary. But the body often hides meaningful patterns inside ordinary moments, especially after 60. What looks like a harmless afternoon dip can sometimes be a clue that energy handling is not as smooth as it used to be. And once you start noticing that, the next sign becomes much easier to understand. Because for many seniors, the same burden that drains energy also shows up at the table after meals. Warning sign number 2: bloating or heaviness after meals. You finish a meal, push the plate away, and expect your body to settle within a reasonable time. But instead, your stomach feels overly full, your clothes feel tighter, and your body seems slower than it should. Sometimes it is not sharp pain at all, just a dragging, crowded feeling that lingers longer than you expect. You may sit back in your chair and wonder why an ordinary meal now feels like such a large event. Many people blame the meal itself, but after 60, the pattern behind the meal often matters just as much. One reason this can happen is that bile flow may become less efficient with age and daily overload. Bile helps the body break down fats so food can move through the digestive process more smoothly. When that support becomes less steady, richer foods may feel heavier, slower, and harder to tolerate. Think of it like trying to wash greasy dishes with too little warm water and too little motion. Nothing stops completely, but everything feels less clean, less smooth, and much slower to clear. This is why bloating after meals is not always just about eating too much. It can also reflect slower digestion, a heavier liver workload, or a body that is less efficient with fats and waste processing. A common mistake is assuming that as long as there is no burning pain, there is nothing worth noticing. But the signal behind the signal is often this persistent sense of fullness that does not match what you actually ate. And when that starts happening more often, it deserves observation instead of automatic dismissal. A helpful step today is to pay attention to which meals trigger that heavy, swollen feeling most consistently. Notice whether fried foods, creamy sauces, sugary desserts, or large portions leave you feeling worse for hours. This week, try smaller meals, slower eating, and a short walk afterward instead of sitting immediately for a long time. You can also compare how your body feels after a simple plate with lean protein and fiber versus a rich, processed meal. That kind of quiet comparison often teaches more than guesswork ever does. In my view, this is one of the clearest, everyday signals that the body is asking for a lighter load. It may seem small because it happens around such a common part of life, but common does not mean meaningless. The body often reveals stress through digestion before it ever does through something louder or more dramatic. And once meals start feeling heavier than they used to, other quiet signs often begin to make more sense too. One of them can show up not in the stomach, but right on the skin where people least expect it. Warning sign number 3: skin dryness, itching, or rough patches. You may notice your skin feeling tighter after a shower, rougher around the arms, or itchier at night. Maybe you reach for lotion more often, but the relief does not seem to last the way it used to. Sometimes the change shows up as dull, dry patches that were not part of your normal routine before. It is easy to blame the weather, aging alone, or a simple lack of moisturizer and move on. But when skin changes become more persistent, the body may be hinting at something deeper. Your skin is not separate from the rest of your internal workload. When the body is under more filtration stress, the skin can sometimes reflect that burden in subtle ways. The liver helps process waste, hormones, and byproducts that the body needs to clear efficiently. If that system becomes less smooth, the body may not feel as balanced or as comfortable from the inside out. And after 60, those quiet imbalances can show up through dryness, irritation, or a rougher skin texture. That does not mean every itchy arm or dry patch points straight to liver strain. Low humidity, medications, bathing habits, allergies, and poor hydration can all play a role too. But when the skin feels drier and more reactive alongside fatigue, bloating, or slower recovery, the pattern matters. The signal behind the signal is often not cosmetic at all, but a body handling internal stress less gracefully. And that is exactly why these smaller surface clues should not be dismissed too quickly. A useful step today is to notice whether the dryness comes with other changes in digestion, energy, or tolerance to rich food. This week, increase water steadily, avoid overly hot showers, and reduce one processed or sugary food you eat often. You can also pay attention to whether itching or roughness gets worse after heavier meals or alcohol. That kind of observation is simple, but it can reveal a lot when repeated over several days. If skin changes are intense, spreading, unusual, or clearly new, it is wise to have them evaluated. In my view, the skin often tells the truth before people are ready to hear it. Not because it always signals danger, but because it reflects internal stress in a very visible way. What seems like a minor annoyance can sometimes be part of a larger pattern the body is quietly showing you. And once you understand that, the next warning sign becomes even more revealing. Because one of the clearest shifts after 60 is when the body suddenly handles alcohol very differently than before. Warning sign number 4. Alcohol feels stronger than it used to. You may have a glass of wine with dinner or a drink at a family gathering and feel it much faster than before. What once felt mild now leaves you heavy, sleepy, flushed, or foggy in a surprisingly short time. Sometimes it is not even a large amount, just enough to make you feel off for the rest of the evening. You may wake the next morning feeling flatter, thirstier, or less restored than the drink seems to justify. Many adults assume that is just getting older, but the body may be revealing something more specific. The liver is responsible for processing alcohol, and that job can become less efficient with age and overload. After 60, body water distribution changes, recovery slows, and the margin for excess often gets smaller. That means the same drink may hit harder because your system handles it with less flexibility than before. Think of it like a task that used to be easy, but now competes with too many other jobs at once. The drink itself may not be different, but the body handling it often is. This is why reduced alcohol tolerance can be a meaningful warning sign, especially when it is new or increasing. It may suggest that the liver is already working harder with medications, rich food, sugar, or daily inflammation. A common mistake is treating the stronger reaction as a random annoyance instead of part of a larger pattern. The signal behind the signal is often that your system has less reserve than it used to have. And when reserve gets lower, the body becomes more honest about what it can no longer brush aside. A smart step today is to notice not just how alcohol feels during the meal, but how it feels hours later. Pay attention to flushing, heaviness, poor sleep, next day fatigue, or digestion that feels slower than usual. This week, try reducing the amount, drinking more water, and avoiding alcohol alongside very rich evening meals. You can also compare how your body feels on a week with no alcohol at all versus your usual routine. That kind of simple test often makes the pattern much easier to read without drama or guesswork. In my view, this is one of the clearest signs that the liver may be asking for less pressure, not more willpower. The answer is rarely to ignore it and push through, because that usually teaches the body the wrong lesson. When tolerance changes, something in the background has often changed first. And that matters, because the next sign can feel even quieter and easier to dismiss. Sometimes it shows up as a mild pressure under the right ribs that people keep normalizing for too long. Warning sign number 5. Mild pressure on the right side under the ribs. Some adults notice it while sitting after dinner, bending to tie a shoe, or getting up from the couch. It is not always pain in the dramatic sense people fear when they hear the word liver. More often, it feels like a dull awareness, a mild pressure, or a strange heaviness under the right ribs. Because it is subtle and inconsistent, many people dismiss it before they ever study the pattern. But quiet discomfort in that area can matter more than its mild tone suggests. The liver sits on the right side of the upper abdomen, tucked under the rib cage. When the body is under more digestive or metabolic strain, that region can sometimes feel fuller or heavier. This does not mean the liver itself is sending a loud pain signal, the way people often imagine. It may be more like a crowded internal feeling when the system is working harder than usual. And after 60, that quiet sense of pressure can become easier to notice after rich food, alcohol, or inactivity. Now, this is where many adults start looking in the wrong direction. They assume that if the feeling is not sharp, constant, or severe, it cannot mean anything useful. But the body often speaks in patterns first, especially when an organ is strained rather than acutely injured. The signal behind the signal is not just the location, but when it appears and what tends to trigger it. That is why timing, meals, posture, and repetition matter more here than people expect. A good step today is to notice whether that pressure shows up after fatty meals, sugary snacks, or alcohol. Pay attention to whether it fades with lighter eating, walking, and better hydration over several days. You do not need to press on the area repeatedly or become anxious every time you feel a sensation there. You simply need to observe it honestly and connect it to the rest of your body's signals. And if this kind of calm, practical health guidance helps you, following along here is a wise way to stay informed. In my view, this is one of the easiest signs to dismiss because it rarely arrives with drama. But subtle does not mean imaginary, and mild does not always mean meaningless. When the same area keeps speaking up after certain foods or habits, the pattern deserves your respect. That is especially true when it travels with bloating, fatigue, brain fog, or slower recovery. And the next sign often shows up exactly there, not as pressure alone, but as a body that stays sluggish for hours after eating. Warning sign number 6. Slower recovery after heavy meals. You eat something fried, overly sweet, or heavily processed, and the meal seems to stay with you for hours. Not just in your stomach, but in your whole system. Your body feels slower, your mind feels duller, and even simple movement seems less appealing afterward. Sometimes you sit in the living room later and still feel like the meal is asking for too much from you. Many seniors assume that is just part of eating well after 60, but the pattern can mean more than that. The liver helps process fats, regulate blood sugar, and deal with the metabolic aftermath of a heavy meal. When that workload becomes harder to manage, recovery from rich food may feel longer and less smooth. It is a bit like asking an already busy cleanup crew to handle a much larger mess all at once. Nothing may look dramatic from the outside, but inside, the body may be working overtime to catch up. And after 60, that catch-up process often feels more noticeable because flexibility is not what it once was. This is why the issue is not only what you eat, but how long your body stays burdened afterward. A common mistake is focusing only on taste or portion size, while ignoring the long recovery tail that follows. The signal behind the signal is often this extended sluggishness that does not match what feels like a normal meal. If you feel heavy, sleepy, bloated, foggy, or oddly flat for hours, your system may be under more strain. And when that happens repeatedly, the body is usually asking for a different pattern, not just more tolerance. A useful step today is to compare how long it takes you to feel normal after different kinds of meals. Notice whether fried foods, desserts, fast food, or large evening portions leave you slowed down far longer. This week, try making one dinner lighter and earlier, then pay attention to your energy 2 and 4 hours later. A short walk after eating may also help your body handle the load with less drag and less lingering heaviness. These are simple tests, but they often make hidden patterns much easier to recognize. In my view, slower recovery after meals is one of the most practical warning signs in this whole conversation. Because it is not abstract, and it does not require perfect health awareness to notice. You feel it in real time, in real life, after an ordinary choice many people make every day. And once you see that clearly, the next sign stops sounding strange at all. Because when the liver is overworked, it is not only digestion that may slow down, but mental clarity too. Warning sign number 7. Brain fog or difficulty concentrating. You may be reading something simple, following a conversation, or trying to remember why you walked into a room, and for a moment, your mind feels slower than it should, as if the signal is getting there with a slight delay. It is not always dramatic confusion, and it is not always the kind of memory lapse people fear most. More often, it feels like cloudy focus, reduced sharpness, or a strange mental heaviness that comes and goes. Many older adults blame that entirely on age, but the body often gives a more layered explanation than that. The liver helps process waste, support energy balance, and stabilize some of the internal chemistry the brain depends on. When that background cleanup becomes less efficient, the whole system can feel a little less clear and a little less steady. Think of it like a room that is still usable, but the air no longer feels quite as fresh as it should. The brain does not work in isolation, and after 60, it often feels the effects of body overload more quickly. That is why brain fog can sometimes be part of a broader liver stress pattern, rather than a separate issue. Now, not every moment of forgetfulness means the liver is the main cause. Poor sleep, medication side effects, dehydration, blood sugar swings, and stress can all blur concentration too. But when mental fog tends to show up after heavy meals, alcohol, or days of poor digestion, that connection matters. The signal behind the signal is often not just memory, but reduced clarity tied to how the body is managing its load. And that is where people often miss the bigger picture, by treating the brain and body like separate stories. A helpful step today is to notice when the fog appears, not just that it appears. Does it show up more in the afternoon, after a rich meal, after poor sleep, or the morning after alcohol? This week, try keeping meals lighter, drinking water earlier in the day, and taking a short walk after eating. You can also compare your mental clarity on simpler food days versus heavier, more processed ones. That kind of quiet tracking can reveal a pattern that random worry never will. In my view, this is one of the most misunderstood warning signs after 60. People hear brain fog and immediately think only about the brain, when the body may be shaping that experience too. Sometimes the mind feels slow because the whole system is carrying more burden than it can manage smoothly. And when you start seeing that connection, the next sign becomes easier to recognize in daily life. Because one of the clearest clues of overnight strain is waking up tired, even after a full night in bed. Warning sign number 7. Brain fog or difficulty concentrating. You may be reading something simple, following a conversation, or trying to remember why you walked into a room, and for a moment, your mind feels slower than it should, as if the signal is getting there with a slight delay. It is not always dramatic confusion, and it is not always the kind of memory lapse people fear most. More often, it feels like cloudy focus, reduced sharpness, or a strange mental heaviness that comes and goes. Many older adults blame that entirely on age, but the body often gives a more layered explanation than that. The liver helps process waste, support energy balance, and stabilize some of the internal chemistry the brain depends on. When that background cleanup becomes less efficient, the whole system can feel a little less clear and a little less steady. Think of it like a room that is still usable, but the air no longer feels quite as fresh as it should. The brain does not work in isolation, and after 60, it often feels the effects of body overload more quickly. That is why brain fog can sometimes be part of a broader liver stress pattern rather than a separate issue. Now, not every moment of forgetfulness means the liver is the main cause. Poor sleep, medication side effects, dehydration, blood sugar swings, and stress can all blur concentration too. But when mental fog tends to show up after heavy meals, alcohol, or days of poor digestion, that connection matters. The signal behind the signal is often not just memory, but reduced clarity tied to how the body is managing its load. And that is where people often miss the bigger picture, by treating the brain and body like separate stories. A helpful step today is to notice when the fog appears, not just that it appears. Does it show up more in the afternoon, after a rich meal, after poor sleep, or the morning after alcohol? This week, try keeping meals lighter, drinking water earlier in the day, and taking a short walk after eating. You can also compare your mental clarity on simpler food days versus heavier, more processed ones. That kind of quiet tracking can reveal a pattern that random worry never will. In my view, this is one of the most misunderstood warning signs after 60. People hear brain fog and immediately think only about the brain, when the body may be shaping that experience too. Sometimes the mind feels slow because the whole system is carrying more burden than it can manage smoothly. And when you start seeing that connection, the next sign becomes easier to recognize in daily life. Because one of the clearest clues of overnight strain is waking up tired even after a full night in bed. Common daily habits that quietly overwork the liver. Most liver strain does not come from one dramatic mistake people make once in a while. It usually builds through ordinary habits repeated so often they stop feeling important. A little too much sugar here, too much snacking there, not enough water, not enough movement. None of it seems serious in the moment, which is exactly why the pattern becomes easy to miss. The body often gets overloaded slowly, through routines that look normal from the outside. One of the biggest pressures is excess sugar, especially when it shows up all day instead of just at dessert. Frequent sweet drinks, packaged snacks, and constant grazing give the liver more to process than many people realize. Processed foods can make that worse because they often combine sugar, unhealthy fats, and additives in one easy package. Think of it like giving the same worker a new pile before the last one has even been cleared. After 60, that kind of constant input can feel heavier because recovery is usually less forgiving. Alcohol can add another layer, even when the amount seems moderate by social standards. So can dehydration, because the body works less smoothly when cleanup and circulation do not have enough support. Low movement matters too, not because exercise needs to be intense, but because stillness slows many helpful processes. A common mistake is thinking only extreme habits damage health, while mild, daily overload does the real quiet work. The signal behind the signal is often not one bad choice, but too many small ones, stacked too close together. A useful reset this week is to choose just 3 things to reduce pressure, without making life feel rigid. You might cut one sugary snack, drink more water before noon, and take a 10-minute walk after dinner. You might also stop eating late at night, so the body gets a cleaner recovery window while you sleep. These changes sound simple, but simple does not mean weak when the body has been asking for relief for months. And if this kind of practical, no-drama guidance helps you sort through the noise, staying connected here is worth it. In my view, this is the turning point where many adults regain more control than they expected. Because once you see how daily habits quietly load the liver, the problem starts feeling less mysterious. It becomes something you can influence, with steady decisions instead of fear or confusion. That is where progress usually begins. Not with perfection, but with less friction and better rhythm. And the next topic is where we turn that into support, using simple foods and habits that help the liver work more smoothly. Simple foods and habits that help support liver function after 60. When people hear liver support, they often imagine complicated cleanses, expensive powders, or strict food rules. But in real life, the liver usually responds better to steady basics than dramatic health experiments. A glass of water in the morning, a lighter lunch, a walk after dinner, and fewer processed foods can matter more. That may sound almost too simple, which is why many people skip past it looking for something stronger. But the body often improves through consistency long before it improves through intensity. Hydration is one of the quiet foundations, because the body works less smoothly when it is running dry. Fiber helps too, especially from vegetables, beans, oats, berries, and other whole foods that support digestion and balance. Lighter meals give the liver less to process at one time, which can reduce that heavy, backed-up feeling after eating. Walking helps because movement supports circulation, blood sugar control, and the way the body handles meals. After 60, these simple supports often matter more because the margin for overload is smaller than it used to be. This is also where I think many people waste energy on the wrong priorities. They chase the idea of detox while ignoring the daily habits that quietly create the burden in the first place. The liver does not usually need a dramatic rescue plan, as much as it needs less friction every day. The signal behind the signal is often not deficiency alone, but too much pressure and too little recovery support. And when you reduce that pressure, the body often becomes easier to read and easier to help. A good place to start this week is with one simple breakfast and one simpler dinner you can repeat. Add more water earlier in the day, include fiber somewhere obvious, and try to leave more space between dinner and sleep. Choose foods that feel steady rather than exciting for a few days, and notice how your body responds. If walking feels manageable, even 10 minutes after a meal can be a smart and realistic place to begin. You do not need a perfect routine, only a calmer one that your body can actually live with. In my view, this is where liver support becomes practical instead of performative. You stop trying to impress the body and start cooperating with it. That shift changes everything, because it replaces frustration with something more useful: direction. And once you have that direction, protecting the liver early becomes much less abstract. It becomes part of protecting your comfort, your energy, and your independence for longer. How to protect your liver early and stay independent longer. Most people do not think about liver protection until something shows up on a lab report or starts interrupting daily life. But the best time to support the liver is usually earlier, when the signs are still quiet and the body is still adaptable. That is especially true after 60, when small problems often take longer to undo than to prevent. You do not protect independence only by avoiding emergencies. You protect it by noticing patterns early, while simple choices still make a meaningful difference. The liver is remarkably resilient, and that is the part many people forget. It can often respond well when you lower the daily burden and give the body steadier conditions to work with. Less processed food, Less alcohol, fewer blood sugar swings, more hydration, more walking, and better sleep all matter. Think of it less as fixing one organ, and more as removing pressure from a system that has been carrying too much. When the load becomes lighter, comfort, digestion, and energy often become easier to support. What matters most is not doing everything at once, but knowing what to prioritize first. If I was starting somewhere, I would start with evening habits, hydration, and the foods that leave you feeling heavy the longest. That is often where the body gives the clearest feedback with the least confusion. The signal behind the signal is usually not that your body is failing, but that it wants a more workable rhythm. And in many adults, that rhythm improves through steady support, not aggressive overcorrection. A smart 7-day reset can be simple. Lighter dinners, fewer sugary snacks, more water, and a short walk after meals. Keep watching your afternoon energy, your digestion, your sleep, and how your body feels the next morning. If the pattern improves, that tells you something useful. If symptoms are sudden, severe, or clearly new, talk to a clinician, because this is educational, not medical advice. You can stay calm, stay practical, and still take your body seriously. In my view, that is the real goal of this whole conversation. Not fear, not perfection, and not chasing some fantasy of aging without change. The goal is to stay clear enough, steady enough, and comfortable enough to keep living on your own terms. Your body is not always getting weaker at random. Sometimes it is simply asking to be read earlier so you can protect your independence longer. If this video helped you, the next one might reveal something important about your body. Take a moment to watch it now. You may notice something you've been ignoring.